Well, Oswald is really still quite a mystery to most. I have to scratch my head quite often when looking into Lee Harvey Oswald, because the reality is that there were at least two people living under the name Lee Harvey Oswald from the time that he was age 12 back in 1952, 1953. Then when you get closer to 1960 and up, you have at least four other people impersonating Oswald in Mexico City, in Dallas, in New Orleans, all over the place. So just from that alone, it should be pretty obvious that he is working for some form of intelligence, whether CIA or naval intelligence. You know, back then, who knows if they were one and the same. So, but today we're gonna talk a little bit about Oswald, and this is going to kick off a new series that I'll be doing weekly called Beyond Classified. It'll be mostly Kennedy, but I am going to do some other subjects as well. Martin Luther King, a bunch of the other assassinations. We'll do World War II. We'll do a whole bunch of stuff, and that will be featured only in the Forbidden Knowledge News social, which you can find at forbiddenknowledgenews.online. I believe I'm going to keep that one free, at least for the time being, so everybody can catch these episodes there without having to get a premium membership. So we want to get people into the Forbidden Knowledge News social, posting, interacting, because the amount of censorship that's everywhere, it has really impacted us greatly, and we needed our own platform to really be able to speak our minds, and finally we have it. But
yeah, so guys, on that note as well, it's going to be an amazing site once it grows. We're getting new members every day, and like he said, it's censorship free, and we're going to have some amazing content featured there. It's all free on the social site, but we also have our premium member section where you can have access to all my premium interviews, stuff that's too controversial for YouTube, stuff that's been taken down, brand new episodes that I can't put up on YouTube. Such great information you won't find anywhere else. It's only $6.99 a month. You can get a whole year for $69.99, plus access to next year's Forbidden Knowledge NewsCon 2021. It's a really great deal. And guys, the information that you're going to get on here, you won't be able to find it anywhere else. But go ahead and sign up for our social site. Like he said, that's forbiddenknowledgenews.online, or you can access it at forbiddenknowledge.news. Check out everything there, and please sign up for the premium site. You won't regret it. There's tons of content there. And Cory, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you.
all right, screen share working?
This looks good. I see Lee Harvey Oswald,
All right.
Patsy.
Great. Okay, so the person who is most credited with really uncovering the two Oswalds is John Armstrong. His website is called harveyandlee.com. He's got a lot of information there. It's really crazy, but it's really not that crazy when you put it in the proper context. Before we continue and I go over some of the evidence in regards to the two Oswalds, when people hear that, they think it's just insanity. It's completely crazy. And I started to talk about this at Forbidden Knowledge NewsCon, but I went off on a tangent and never finished. So let me finish that now. When you go back to the late 1940s and early 1950s, what kind of state of mind was the CIA in, and the US government in? They had, they always have to have an enemy, right? And despite the fact that the Soviet Union was our ally all through World War II, as soon as that war ended, we needed a new enemy. And so they drew the short straw, and they have been our, quote, enemy ever since. Now, is it really insane to think that for them to want to get a spy into the Soviet Union, that they would pluck a child from an Eastern Bloc country who speaks fluent Russian, transplant him to the United States, raise him under the identity of a person who already has that identity, and then when the time is right, send him back to the Soviet Union as a spy? That is not insane at all. In fact, if they hadn't have done that, it would be kind of ridiculous on their part, because they were going to extreme measures, great lengths and extreme measures to get someone into the Soviet Union, because at the time it was very, very difficult. Communism as the enemy, well, was it really an enemy? who knows? The idea that communism would take over the world is quite ridiculous in hindsight, but they did invest tons of resources, lots of manpower in attempting to crack the veil of the Soviet Union. And it seems as though the ease at which Oswald got into the Soviet Union and then got out with a bride, which is absolutely unheard of, it kind of points to the fact that some people at some level in the Soviet government were in on the Oswald defection. And Oswald wasn't the only the only false defector. There were at least a half a dozen false defectors who all came back to the United States within about 6 months of Lee Harvey Oswald returning, including a guy named Thomas Valley. Thomas Valley was the patsy in the Chicago plot. Now, most people don't realize that there were at least 3 previous plots to assassinate Kennedy in that November in 1963 in Tampa, Miami, and in Chicago. In Chicago, a Secret Service agent named Abraham Bolden actually is the first Black Secret Service agent. He basically foiled the plot, and he uncovered a conspiracy to assassinate the president, although there wasn't really any evidence, and Kennedy's motorcade was canceled. So they ended up trying to put the whole blame on him, and they got him on some false charges, and it was really quite a debacle. But the evidence of another plot involving Thomas Valley in Chicago is overwhelming, and he was also another false defector. When you look at the faces of Lee Harvey Oswald over time, you know, these guys looked very, very similar, very close in age.
Not similar enough, though. Not similar enough at all.
Yeah. I mean, like this picture from 1958, look at that hairline. I mean, this picture here was taken by Robert Oswald. It appeared in Robert Oswald's book. When you look at the one on the bottom, he always had that part on the left. The one on top, he never had a part at all. So John Armstrong he's been ridiculed by many, but his work his data is great. Some of his conclusions are just flatly wrong, and I'll talk about some of those. But you don't want to discredit the data he acquired because his conclusions were faulty. But I do believe he is correct in most of his research, in as far as like this picture here on the end. It's a pretty well-known Oswald photo. It to me appears like it is a composite between the two Oswalds. It seems insane on the surface, but when you really think about it, the mindset of the CIA and the US government at the time, it makes perfect sense. So there was a 201 file. A 201 file is a CIA file on an individual who sometimes they're employees, sometimes not. There's another kind of file, I forget what it's called, but the CIA had another kind of file where they would have your name in it, and it was easy for them to deny that you worked for them. This is not one of those. A 201 file indicates they had some sort of ongoing contact, or you were on the radar, or but on the 201 file, Ann Eggert, who was she was like a clerical person at the CIA, she included the name on 3 different documents in the same month that Lee Harvey Oswald had the middle name of Henry. And so I'll read this to you. Shortly after Ann Eggert opened Oswald's 201 file on 9 December 1960, she filled out a control card on him. For the 3rd time in less than a month, she wrote his name as Lee Henry Oswald. We know for certain that the middle name Henry was in the biographical information on Oswald sent by CIA to the State Department on 3 November 1960, 5 weeks before Girder opened the Oswald 201 file. That document was undoubtedly examined by the HSCA, but curiously, Goldsmith did not ask Girder about it, Goldsmith being an HSCA member. That's the House Assassination Committee, or one of those things. The other document with the middle name Henry was the Oswald biography Girder prepared for the State Department. When she used it to open Oswald's 201 file, she did not do it because she was under pressure or distracted. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she lied to Goldsmith about this key information in her sworn deposition. The CIA lies. They lie under oath. It's been addressed in CIA documents whether or not they should lie under oath, and they concluded, yes, they should lie under oath. So taking an oath to the United States or to tell the truth means absolutely nothing to the CIA. They are, as Doug Valentine has put it, an organized criminal enterprise. Here's some more of the documentation on Henry as a middle name. Now, from my perspective, could this just have been done to muddy the water? Yes, because as we've seen in psychological warfare campaigns, they release contradictory information. This could just be information to further muddy the waters, because the CIA does not really care about honesty or the truth or any of that stuff. All they care about is their own agenda. Okay, so here we have a letter from Hoover, the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, June 3rd, 1960. It is brought to his attention that in October of 1959, that somebody was using Oswald's name and attempted to purchase a vehicle. God, I forget, it must have been, yeah, I think it was New Orleans, tried to purchase a vehicle in New Orleans. And basically, they knew about it back in 1960. They obviously knew about Oswald. None of what Oswald was doing was a secret to anyone. So that's that. That just shows Hoover's awareness. And so let's talk a little bit about Oswald and the Civil Air Patrol. The Civil Air Patrol, it's really kind of interesting, and there's more documentary obfuscation going on when you look into the Civil Air Patrol.
And you could also say which Oswald are we talking about?
That's exactly it. Because from what I can tell, once Oswald went to Dallas, I do not have any evidence, nor do I really know if the original Oswald was ever there or doing anything or involved in the assassination that day or any of the events that day. Because when I go over the timelines, when I look at the shooters, when I look at what happened from how he got from Dealey Plaza to the movie theater, if he was even at Dealey Plaza, because honestly, I am starting to be under the belief that Oswald, as we know him, never worked at the book depository. I'll go off on a tangent here just for a second because I didn't really include this in the presentation, but you have in mid-October, Oswald gets the job at the book depository, allegedly. However, around the same time, you got William Seymour, Lawrence Howard, and Lauren Hall all coming to Dallas. So they show up in Dallas at the same time that Lee Harvey Oswald gets the job at the depository. On the day of the assassination, Oswald is seen running out a side door, getting into a green Rambler station wagon, and then taking off with what it said in the paperwork was a Negro, but it was actually a heavy-set husky Latino. And that Latino was probably Lawrence Howard. And he got detained immediately after the assassination. He was coming out of the book depository out the back door, and he was let go because he didn't speak English. Hell of a reason to let somebody go, right? But he did speak English. He was faking it. There's registration proof that he owned a Green Rambler. The Green Rambler did not belong to Ruth Payne, did not belong to Clay Shaw, even though Clay Shaw did have a Green Rambler also. But the person who ran out the side door and gets into the green station wagon was identified by a bunch of people as looking identical to Lee Harvey Oswald. However, it doesn't make sense for it to be Lee Harvey Oswald. It makes more sense for it to have been William Seymour, because William Seymour was the Oswald impersonator at the rifle range where he was shooting at other people's targets, because there he was seen with a heavy-set husky Latino with a pockmarked face. That anytime you see that reference, they're talking about Lawrence Howard. So it makes more sense for it to have been William Seymour who was working at the book depository, because half the people in that building never, ever saw him there, ever. And so when you work in a building, even if you work in an office building and there's people who work in offices that you're not familiar with, you see those people throughout the day on cigarette breaks, on, coming in the morning. You bump into them in the hall at different points. Everyone would have seen Oswald in the 6 weeks that he had worked there. And half the building didn't. And the other half that did worked for either the book depository or the book publishing company on the 4th floor, which was definitely connected to the assassination, because in my opinion, and we're going to go off on another small tangent, you have the cop Baker and Roy Truly who come into the building, and supposedly there's that story about seeing Oswald on the 2nd floor drinking a Coke, and then Roy Truly vouches for him and he walks out, and that's the last they see of him. When you go back and you read the original reports and you look at Baker's notes, that didn't happen. That was a myth. That was propagated by the JFK film, which was an Israeli propaganda film. We'll talk about that some other time. But the actual incident occurred on the 4th floor, and he was drinking from a water fountain. And there had been other speculations that William Seymour had been on the fourth floor as more of a keeping watch, because you had the elevator that went up and down, right? Perhaps even the power grid was there on the fourth floor. But anyway, in the original report and the original notes taken by Baker, it says the fourth floor, and I'm convinced that that was William Seymour. So you've got William Seymour and these guys coming to Dallas at the same time that Oswald allegedly works at the book depository, and then half the people have never seen Oswald before. Nah, it just all fits. It doesn't make sense for me for Oswald to have ever worked there. And if Oswald said he worked there, it was probably his cover. You know, if he did ever go there, he might have just been going there to meet with a handler or some kind of contact. And also, there are conflicting records about Oswald going to Montreal, Oswald going to North Dakota. There's conflicting information about Oswald sightings in other states, but his attendance record at the book depository was perfect. Okay, so somebody was going to the book depository every day. We're going to assume they were not faking those records, but it just makes more sense for it to have been William Seymour than it does Oswald that worked there. And so Oswald might not have even had to flee from the book depository, because there's no record of Oswald leaving there other than getting in the station wagon as seen by Roger Craig, or getting on the bus and the cab and that whole nonsense, which I'm going to do a full episode on that incident one day, because it is complete bogus. He never lived at the North Beckley address. He lived at 3610 North Beckley, not whatever the address was on North Beckley where he was said to have lived. Nothing you've been told about Oswald is true. It's pure fiction. So back to that day, the second Oswald, I don't know what he did in Dallas, if he even went to Dallas, or if there was even any room for him to be in Dallas. They might have told him, hey, just get the hell out of Dodge, because this is going to go down and we got all our bases covered. Who knows? I'm speculating, but I have not been able to trace any of the actions of any players on that day to a second Oswald, although there was a person who was, it was reported that a second Oswald was seen at a laundromat off of North Beckley, probably about 2:30, 2:35, and that he was driving a station wagon. That was probably William Seymour again. William Seymour is all over the place. But in this photograph here, you have David Ferry on the left. You have one of the Oswalds here on the right. Now, David Ferry, of course, he denied that he ever knew Oswald. Then he admitted it. Then he denied it. I mean, he couldn't really admit anything, because he was one of the shooters on the knoll. And the more answers he gave, the more he would implicate himself in the cover-up. But and then another thing about the Civil Air Patrol is that, besides the fact that it was a smuggling front, and if you Google this, if you Google Civil Air Patrol human trafficking, you will find an article from about a year ago where a woman said that when she was a little girl, she was trafficked through the Civil Air Patrol. It's, you know, this is what governments do. Okay, Epstein was not a lone wolf, human trafficker. He worked for the highest levels of the Israeli government, and as we all know, or should know, the Israel and Tel Aviv call the shots for the United States and the CIA. So
when you look at the intricacies of these operations and these psychological warfare campaigns, and the compartmentalization that the CIA uses, to where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, it makes it so difficult to sift through all this information. And when you imagine the technology and the advancements they have now, I mean, it's terrifying, the links that the CIA has reached to now, and what they could be possibly doing to the American people today. You know, we see what's going on right now, and we just can't imagine what's going on behind the scenes and the CIA's involvement with everything now.
Yeah, like I'm convinced they're behind them in Israel, and I call it the cabal, okay? Because really, it's the cabal is Israel as a whole, not just the Mossad. Because you got to think, above the Mossad, who do you have? You have the Israeli government, and who do you have above the Israeli government? The Jewish agency. Okay, the Jewish agency really is who calls the shots for the Mossad. They're above the Mossad. And so I think that they, and then you have like the remnants of the Nazis through the deal in the cut with Reinhard Gehlen. I hate to sound like a broken record, but that's probably one of the most important things in world history, and it really explains the state of the modern world. But I don't know what happened to the remnants of the Nazis. They just kind of disappeared. And when you know who somebody is, they're usually the front. So if you got the CIA and the Mossad as the front, who knows? Are the Nazis calling the shots? I don't know. I don't even want to speculate that, but nothing is ridiculous anymore.